The captain of the day is Mr. Asiedu-Dartey. He serves as the managing director, the chief executive and executive director of Stanbic Bank Ghana Limited. Mr. Dartey served as an executive director of Barclays Bank of Ghana Limited until June 17, 2015. He serves as the board chairman of the Ghana Council for Scientific and Industrial Research, director of SOS Villages Ghana. He's been an independent non-executive director at Goldfields Ghana Limited since August 1, 2016. He holds a BSc in agriculture from the University of Ghana and a master's degree in banking and finance from the Fin-Africa Institute in Italy. Mr. Dartey, thank you very much for your time. Good to have you on Time with the Captains.
Thank you very much.
Great. So, tell us what it means to be Chief Executive Officer of a multinational firm like Stanbic Bank.
Well, a great privilege to be in that position, but it imposes a lot of requirements, that you need to superintend foreign capital in a country that the majority of the shareholders are not represented. So you have to ensure that you understand what the direction of the group is, what the shareholders want. You have to abide by the rules and regulations of the country in which you serve, the law of Ghana, the banking law of Ghana, and serve the customers of Ghana. And above all, look after the staff who actually do the work. So quite an interesting job, quite challenging, but it's a privilege to be where I am.
How long have you served in this position?
I've been CEO of Stanbic Bank since April 2006, joining Standard Bank Group from Barclays, where I was based in South Africa. So I've been CEO of Standard Bank Ghana since 2006.
How challenging has it been superintending over 1,000 staff?
Well, it's interesting, and so far we've had complete alignment, and that's where leadership comes from. If you point in the right direction and set challenging targets that everybody, in the stakeholder value chain align with, it's not that difficult, because people come into companies to give up their very best and to be counted as part of the people who have built successful organizations. So to the extent that as CEO, you are able to align people, and align the resources, it's not that much of a challenge.
Tonight we've got over 30 students from the University of Professional Studies, both undergraduate and graduate students, who want to tap from your experiences as Chief Executive Officer of a multinational firm. I'd like to start off by asking, how important is formal education?
Formal education is extremely important. It sets a context of your ability to appreciate a wider frame, of how a modern economy or a modern state is organized, and the roles of all stakeholders within such a complex environment. So, it is formal education that brings us up to speed with the roles that every single resource, including human resources, both domestic, international, how they interact to give you results. And that's what all formal education is about.
It doesn't necessarily translate into success life after school.
It's a good beginning, but it doesn't. Unfortunately, you learn a lot more out of school than school just prepares you for a tougher university, which is the University of Life. And the University of Life is all a good blend of your technical skills and interpersonal relationships, because especially as you progress through the ranks. In the first phases of your career, you demonstrate a lot of technical skills because you have to get things done, and therefore you have to be technically competent. As you progress, you gain a lot more seniority, and then they put people underneath you to supervise. So you move a little bit away from too much technical concentration to interpersonal skills, because you need all the interpersonal skills in order to organize teams. Then as you continue to progress, the time that you spend again on getting things done, moves from more on technical skills to a lot more interpersonal skills, because you are now then relating with a wider environment, a big client base, some regulators, the law, internal stakeholders. So just how you pull all those things together is another skill that you need to pick up. So it's a good, probably if you put it in ratios, at the beginning of your career in the first 10 years, you probably need 80% technical competency skills and 10%, 20% interpersonal skills. As you move a position where I sit, you probably need more like 80% interpersonal skills and 20% competency skills. It doesn't mean the competency skills desert you in the process. It just means it becomes second nature. The technical skills become second nature. And what you have to spend a lot more time and focus on is the interpersonal skills. So there's that kind of fine continuum of moving or getting a blend. When you come out of school, you're all fired up, you're technically competent, but as you get into work life, you understand that to get things done to your boss and or to get things done with supervisors, and people that you supervise, you begin to pick up some good character traits, some good interpersonal skills.
With hundreds of people on conversations within this front, is there a formula to becoming successful or to becoming an entrepreneur?
Look, the only formula to becoming an entrepreneur is finding a solution to the problems that confront any kind of society. Define a problem and dedicate yourself to finding a solution to that problem. Once you have clarity on how to solve that problem, and as the evolution of your enterprise goes, you find even better ways to solve that problem or even deal with other emerging problems. That is the starting point of entrepreneur. You've got to have that staying power, and entrepreneurs solve problems. It's not like just picking up what everybody does and you're doing it and you call yourself entrepreneur. You're just copying what others do. You solve problems. You identify a unique problem and dedicate yourself to solving that problem, and make sure that you can then align resources. Once you have a workable solution to a problem, then everything else will follow. Because then there's a wow factor. Everybody says, how did we never discover this? And of course, then capital will follow, resources will follow in terms of human beings. And because you are solving a problem, your client base is there. And as you take feedback from your client base, the clarity to solve that problem and to deal with other emerging problems keeps your business in perpetuity.
Right, so you're watching the very maiden edition of Time with the Captains. Our captain for today is Mr. Alasan Andani. He's the Managing Director, Chief Executive Officer, and Executive Director of Stanbic Bank Ghana Limited. We're going to be going shortly to the audiences, and these are both graduate and undergraduate students of the University of Professional Studies. They've got questions to pose to Mr. Andani, but just to remind you also that those of you who are watching us from home, you can reach us on Facebook as News on Facebook, also on Twitter. You can reach us News on Twitter as well. If you've got questions for Mr. Alasan Andani, we'll be glad to take them already. I've got loads of your comments and questions here. This one from Anthony Lord. That's while you prepared to ask your very first question. This one from Anthony Lord, when he says, I would like to know from Mr. Andani, what is the best way to raise capital for SMEs and startups, and why are most banks unwilling to provide funding for them? And that's from Anthony Awuni. And then this one from Oh Boy Yankee says, he's an inspiration because he has a success story. I need a job. Can you help me, please? And that's from Yankee. So we're going to take our very first question. If you're ready, just mention your name and tell us which level you are, and then you can pose your question to Ms. Andani. Okay. Just hold on, there's a bit of problem with your sound. I don't know if the technical guys can correct that. But while they're working on that, Ms. Andani, let's just take this question from Anthony Lord, who says, I'd like to know from Ms. Andani, what is the best way to raise capital for SMEs and startups, and why are most banks unwilling to provide funding for them?
I like to deal with the question startup, because everything starts small. Because sometimes when we get locked in SME, it can be a habit rather than a phase. Now, as I said, in terms of your methodology to solve that problem. What kind of resources have you defined you need to be able to solve the problem? That's what we look at. You just don't get up and say, you must have clarity on what you want to do. And we don't, we would want to assess how prepared you are. I mean, we'll ask questions and help you, actually. We are not just loan houses. Banks are also business consultants. In fact, we provide business consultancy for SMEs or startups on free basis, because you come to us with a business plan, and we'll take the business plan all through the ideation stage, where you have the idea what you want to do. We'll now then clarify it and see how you'll be received on the market, what kind of resources you need. And once you have that clarity, then we'll be able to come in and help. And of course, and again, I said, let's move away from from SME to initiation, a startup, because most of us in Ghana call SMEs. But I always say, are these SME startups in a growth phase or they're habitual SMEs? There are some who are habitual SMEs. Whatever you do, they want to stay where they are. But that's not what we want. We want to be able to take you, because you are solving a problem, to magnify the solution and make it cover a bigger market.
Right.
And then we can see some future.
Right. We're going to take our very first 3 questions. Yes, your name and which level you are. You pose your question.
Soda, level 300.
Okay.
My question is, do the current entry-level employees have the adequate technical skills to start right?
Okay. We're going to take another question. Yes, your name?
My name is Seiram Busruchi, level 400. I'm more concerned about the kind of economy, that's the economic system that we have, whether it supports entrepreneur, because here is the case, I have a solution to a problem, but the kind of economic system that we practice does not support entrepreneurship, like in a socialist state where government is dominant. So can you say that the kind of economic system that we also practice can help boost entrepreneurship and help people who want to start up?
All right, we're going to take a final one and then we'll take response from Ms. Andani. Final question.
Mr. Ndani, I want to know, because from your profile, your first degree, you didn't do anything related to business. Yeah. So what really drive your interest to go into finance?
I think that's a perfect question that links up with whether the entry level people have the technical skills, right? That's your first question.
Right.
Most employers would employ for attitude and train for the skills they require. There isn't, except in the applicative industries like medicine, or engineering, where specific processes are taught that you would use, in your practice. Most of everything else that we do, you never come out into work and you will have a problem that was perfectly described for you in an exam. So and that's why formal education comes in. It gives you a certain context. But most employers will hire for attitude and train for the skills that they require you to. So you can come up with economics.
We'll hire for attitude. How do you determine that?
We have a whole host of questions we ask. And that's where the leveling comes in. So somebody can come with the first class, some comes with the second class, upper, some comes on lower, some even come with the third. But the third might just come in with the right attitude. So we hire for attitude. Just having the degree probably is 8 out of 10 out of 20 questions. And the rest is unrelated to your degree. You understand? So we hire for attitudes. It's you don't want luggage. You want people who will come think on their feet, people who are, assertive, people who, are resourceful, and they can stand challenge. So we sift that, and when you now and then come, we'll train you for the skills we require you to do the job. So you all graduate with economics. Some are coming into banking, some are going into insurance, some are going into, manufacturing. Would the university have equipped you as basic economic students to do all of that? No. What gets you in is the attitude. And then when you get in, we train you, we equip you with the skills that you require to do your work.
So what did you study?
I came in with agriculture. My interest in business was a segment in agricultural economics called project finance, development finance. And I just loved that whole concept of development finance. So fortunately, I started my career in '85 with SSB Bank, where I was employed into a development finance division, where, to your point, development finance was just about bringing about micro and mega projects, to participate in the economy, where you would go through feasibility report writing, justifications, approvals, project monitoring, until it becomes, so you actually initiate the project, whether it's a hotel, it's a hospital, a manufacturing firm, you go through all of those industrial, technical analysis, market analysis, all the financial analysis, and that was really what, for me, was a spark. And I loved it. So I then moved on to then become a more professional banker by taking my master's in banking and finance. And the other question was
about the economic system and whether or not it supports entrepreneurs.
Entrepreneurs create the economy. I think, you see, that's sometimes the difficulty we face in our country, where we tend to think that it's the governments that brings the economy about. No, it's the reverse. It's entrepreneurs and private sector people who, on identifying the problems that confront our country, set up to solve those problems. And whether you are solving it in agriculture, in services, in manufacturing, and what have you, is the aggregation of that creates the economy. It's not the other way around. Governments just are there to create law and order, and tax those of you who are generating revenue to be able to build social overhead infrastructure and do other things. It's not the government that creates the economy. The governments can create economy, especially in our part of the world where we are under colonial administration. The capital and resources were in the hands of government. So governments decided to produce water, electricity, power, and stuff like that. But in other developed countries, the governments don't do those things. It's private sector people who do things. If we have Dumso, we're saying government. No, if electricity goes off in the middle of Paris, nobody mentions government. They'll mention Electricité de France. Okay, so it's the reverse. Let's think about it as us as individuals, you, the entrepreneurs, you set out creating successful companies, and those successful companies in aggregation creates the economy. Governments are there to regulate, make sure there's fair and law and order and execution of contracts and stuff like that. But above all, governments just wants you to create more profitable and viable enterprises. They can tax it and keep the society running.
You're watching a very maiden edition of Time with the Captains here on TV3. Our first guest, our captain of the day, is Mr. Alassane Andani. He's a Managing Director, Chief Executive Officer, and Executive Director of Stanbic Bank Ghana Limited. Already, we've got loads of your comments on Facebook and on Twitter as well. A lot of them having to do with interest rates and what you think can be done to reduce the interest rate regime in Ghana. I'll take a final question. We'll go for a break and I'll read a few of our social media questions. Okay, so we'll take a short break. When we return, we'll read out a lot more of your social media comments, and then we'll take some more questions from our students. This is Time with the Captains. All right, so you're welcome back to the very maiden edition of Time with the Captains, our monthly mentorship program. And tonight we've got students from the University of Professional Studies. They have the rare privilege of interacting with our captain for the month of January, and that's Alassane Andani. He's the Managing Director of Stanbic Bank Ghana Limited. Just quickly, let me read a few of your social media comments here. This one is from Revelation Oscar. He says, how did you make it to that topmost ladder? Anthony says, how can we reduce interest rates to enhance borrowing? Isaac Adair says, Ivory Coast has its bank lending rates at 3% per annum. We're looking to bring our interest rates down in order for the private sector to thrive. What do you want to take it from?
I think the most topical one is the interest rate. And I do appreciate the very high interest rate, especially I work for Standard Bank Group, where we're in 20 different countries. So we have a view of what interest rate is like in other countries and how it impacts Ghana. The number for Ghana is very high, but interest rates, as you all know, and I'm sure some of you are economic students, is a function of several variables. Inflation, first of all, you must have savings in order to invest, right? That's a basic economic formula. And for people to save, there must be an incentive to save. And that incentive is that you don't diminish the value that you save. So the first diminution of value is inflation. So you need to ensure that savers, are covered for inflation. Then after that, you now start to look at how you then organize the capital in order to give it out, which is your own internal setup. And that's a competitive benchmark, which can vary from one organization to the other. And now you then queue up your economic agents who are coming for the savings that you have created. And in there will be government and the private sector. If you look at those of you again in finance know that in terms of risk management, government is almost regarded as zero risk, right? And every other company has a risk profile. So if government comes and today they say that the policy rate is 26% and I had money or you had money to deploy, where would you place it first? Riskless or Okay, so those are some of the very complicated, issues.
So
and why would government?
So no bank is going to lend below the policy rate.
It's sometimes you can lend below policy rate because certain organizations have what we call ancillary, businesses that you do for them other than just the naked cost of capital. Okay, you do other things for the business, you manage their international trade, domestic trade, and everything else, which generates a lot of fees for you. So you can take a loss, or you can take a back step a bit on the cost of capital and make a lot more money on what we call the non-funded side. But otherwise, the pure allocation formula would be that you allocate first to the riskless, and then you go up the scale. As the risk goes up, the rates of interest goes up. So and again, you have to understand the complexity. When government borrows at 26% or 22%, it's a lot of money. They would rather have saved the money to do something else rather than pay out high interest rates. So governments don't borrow at that rate just because it pleases them to do that. It's a whole complex of how to ensure that inflation, exchange rates, and all those things that a lot of money in the system influences are kept under check.
All right.
So let us look at it from that.
Right. Anybody with a question? Yes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Danny. I want to know the challenges that you've gone through, because I've engaged a couple of entrepreneurs who told me a lot of challenges, and I believe you might, one way or the other, go through some challenges. And how were you able to overcome those challenges? Thank you.
Successful people don't focus on challenges. You always focus on points of success. So if you get out today with 10 things to do, and you, at the end of the day, you did 2 things well, just move on to the next 10 things you want to do tomorrow. Sometimes when you overemphasize the constraint may have been a context, in a certain context. The next day, the next hour presents you a different context. So keep an open mind, focus on your successes, certainly investigate what the issues are around what you call challenges, but don't focus too much on that. Growing up, a lot of learning, sometimes, again, interpersonal skills. You just need to understand how you navigate around certain temperaments and people so that you can gel and work together. Resources, you may go into a presentation, you probably have a great story to tell, but you didn't just get the right preparation in place and you missed the opportunity. So as for those challenges or whatever, they will come, but they should be learning points, but your focus should be on your successors.
Yeah.
Good evening, Mr. Ndani.
Yeah.
I want to find out if...
Your name?
My name is Emmanuel Inketia. I want to find out, Mr. Ndani, with your experience in the banking industry, will you want to be appointed, or will you like to be appointed as the governor of Bank of Ghana?
I didn't think this program was about what I want, but what you want, right? It's what you want. So let's leave that. It's a much bigger, complicated requirement that the governors or the people who manage the economy want to deal with. That's not for me to answer.
We're going to take the next question.
Yeah. Sorry, my name is William Amponsa, level 600. My question is about a startup.
Yeah.
To start a business. Is it wise to go as an individual or go as partners? And if partnership is the best way, how do you sustain it in order not to break along the way?
Okay, let me take another question, and then Mr. Ndani will answer.
Good evening, Mr. Ndani. My name is Adabla Innocent Selassie, level 600 student. Please, I want to ask, previous government imposed capital gain tax. And we know our country, people don't invest that much. So imposition of the capital gain, is this something good in our...
Okay,
Mr. Ndani, just respond to those questions.
I think number one is a startup. And as I said, first of all, what are you starting up to do? You want to solve a problem. You have clarity, and I always say that ideas are like babies. It's not everybody who can handle it. So certainly get people who completely understand what you want to do. It's always better to go out with more than less. But the more where at least they are aligned behind what you want to do. And most of the fintechs, most of the new companies, you would notice that it was always somebody and his roommate, because they shared the same ideas, and came out. And once you're together in a partnership, you are able to pull your human resources, you're able to attract capital, and you're able to manage better. But alignment is always a point. People have to be aligned, and your horizons of success must kind of flow together. Somebody may have a 3-year horizon of success, somebody has a 30-year horizon of success. What makes partnerships fail is when your horizons of success is not aligned. Maybe for the first 2 years you start to make profits, you haven't gone anywhere. You still need to plow the profit back, to shaping up the company and growing it, and somebody else wants to start making drawings. So those things can, derail partnerships. But it's always better if you can get a good partner. It's better to gather resources, manage, but always make sure that you have to align your and somebody else wants to start making drawings. Okay. So those things. And the other question was capital gains tax. Again, it is at the level of development of your economy, to the point that you want people to invest and reinvest, and especially our part of the world where level of capital formation is still very low. It may not necessarily be the wise thing to be taxing capital gains, because you want a lot more people to pull away from consumption and to accumulate savings, go into investments, and make money. And especially when you have very difficult operating environments where interest rates are that high and operating costs are very high, your return may not necessarily be in profits where you are sharing dividends. It may be in the growth of your business idea, which gains, as it were, capital, makes the capital gains. So if you get taxed on it, it probably, will decelerate your growth. So again, it's a balance on sources of revenue that governments, have. But I would argue that for emerging economies like ours, we should just be careful where we impose capital gains taxes.
You're watching the very maiden edition of Time with the Captains here on TV3. Our captain for the month of January is Mr. Alassane. He's a managing director, the chief executive officer and executive director of Stanbic Bank Ghana Limited. Tonight also we've got audiences from the University of Professional Studies, and they are here to interact and also relate with our captain for the month. Now let's go on social media, especially on Facebook, where we are streaming live to find out what people are saying about the program. This one from Anthony Lord Awuni says, I have a business plan on solution to malnutrition in Ghana and Africa in general, but I'm not getting funding. Any advice from Ms. Andani and Stanbic Bank? This one from Roland Adeti says, TV3 is just too good. TV3 or Napo. Thank you very much. This one from Ella Makuba says, Ms. Andani, do you agree with the fact that it is much more difficult for one to realize his or her entrepreneurial ambitions now than, say, 10 years ago? If yes, what do you think is the case? Blankton says, Ms. Andani, what really motivated you to this level? And Redeemer says, Ms. Andani, I have 30,000 CDs, and that happens to be my last money. Which venture should you do you think I should venture into? I'll start off with this one from Lord, who says he has a business plan on solution to malnutrition in Ghana and Africa in general, but he's getting difficulty with funding. What does he do?
Look, I think there are different types of capital and interest for business out there. Malnutrition, would typically be a public social problem. So you would need to sell things like this to the public health authorities, and once the public health authorities buy into it and will have to now then make it a public good, then it makes economic sense now to then produce it and sell it for the public good, whether in Ghana or across Africa. So it's always choosing the partner you go to discuss this with. It's important. It's very important to choose who to discuss it. If you went straight to a commercial bank to discuss an idea like that, commercial banks tend to be, nutrition and malnutrition. Already you are talking of a segment of the population that is already not able to generate enough to look after themselves. So the commercial viability of that entity situated in that market segment you are looking at may not be immediately attractive to, let's say, a commercial bank. But certainly it will be of great importance to the public health authorities. And once the public health authorities, buy into that, it's profitable private business, but who pays for it? public sector. So, you know, your malnutrition and you know, is a public good. So
right.
Yeah.
Ella says, do you agree that with the fact that it's much more difficult now to realize your entrepreneurial ambitions than say 10 years ago? If yes, why do you think that's the case?
I don't agree that it's more difficult now. Now with this kind of internet age, knowledge is so much available. You know, you can reach out to the world with the press of a button. Unlike in, say, 10 years ago, you are on your own. You know, but now, you know, if you have clarity of what you want to do, and you know, the world is your theater, and we shouldn't limit ourselves to our little corners. Now, in a networked world, resources, and there's very little thing new under the world. You look around the world, you will find somewhere where you can get some help.
Blankson Foster says he wants to know what really motivated you to this level.
You know, every one of us are unique. You've got to contribute something. We have not too many days to live in the world. So if you were to go, what would they say you did? That's what motivates me. I mean, every time I encounter people, my vision is, if this was my last time of meeting you, what would be your impression of me? That's how I approach everything that I do. If this was my last time of doing it, would they say I gave it my best shot? If I was talking to you, is this the very best I can give you? Yes, now, this is the very best I can give you. So that's how I approach it.
Let me take my very final question from social media, then I'll return to my audiences to take more of their questions. Redeemer says, Ms. Andani, I have 30,000 CDs, and that happens to be my very last money. Which venture should I engage in?
But this is the most dangerous thing you should never ask. It is about, you know, to succeed, you must identify and do things that you really, really love to do. And you don't have to necessarily be a rocket scientist sending rockets to the moon. There are people who are sending rockets to the moon and very successful. There are people who are making furniture for a place like this and are very successful. So I'll tell Redeemer to find something he really likes to do, a sector that really tickles him, and find a problem there and solve it.
And that's what he wants to find out
right.
What sector do you think?
I cannot think for him. If he thought about it and came, I'm sure we can have a very open conversation.
All right, so Redeemer, make a time with Ms. Andani. You probably could pass by, you know, and he'll give you some tips for your new business. So let me get into the audiences. Who has a microphone to ask a question? Yeah. Your name, which level are you, and pose your question.
Hello, Mr. Andani. My name is Joy Dasari. Okay, my question is, I have this business plan. Maybe as a young entrepreneur, you have a business plan. You are leaving the university.
Yeah.
You don't have any experience, but you are convinced that your business plan will work. So many people tell us we have to work in an organization to get or to gather some experience before you venture into your field. What advice can you please give to this person?
Look, if you have, I tell you, the best thing is always to work for yourselves. If I know what I know now, 30 years ago, I probably would have been working for myself. So always, if you have a business plan that you believe so much in, you see, there's a whole spectrum of people who can help you. It can even start with, we have people we call angel investors. Some businessman, some person you know who has capital, who has an ear, a listening ear, just to go and bounce it off. And once you strike, the person might begin to help you. But again, avoid to take such straight to a commercial bank, because they will ask you, again, show me some. You know, I work in a commercial bank, can be disgraceful. Sometimes, unfortunately in Ghana, we don't have very deep venture capital, you know, enterprises. But, you know, there are initiatives by government to create these organizations. Share the information, but share it very carefully. But don't give up your vision. Have a long-term view. The difficulty we always have is that, you know, most of us don't have tolerance level for pain. When I say tolerance level for pain, hey, you are working on a great idea, but you don't have income, but you're not dying. Stay on that idea until you have somebody who will come and rescue you. But select and talk and see who can, you know, sit with you, give you a listening ear, and move you through from, let's say, angel investing to some startup investments to the big capital raisings.
Sida Mariam Abdullah says, I'm overwhelmed by your intelligence, Ms. Andani. I'm really proud of you. This other one says, Sir, how do you market for goods that are not yet known to customers?
How do you do that? I wish the audience could tell me, but you are solving a problem. So to solve a problem, you've defined it and the solution. When mobile phones came, everybody thought it was people in business who needed mobile phones. Today, market women on the farm need a mobile phone just to find out from the weatherman where the rain is coming from. So it's always about researching your problem. Do people need information? Yes. Who needs it? Yes, it may start with those who can pay for it, business people. And then you now then come through the entire value chain to the farmer who needs it for weather. So go for market research.
Yeah, your name?
My name is Prince, level 400 student. Ms. Andani, I would like to ask, from your speech, you made mention of attitude.
Yes.
So I would like to know the kind of attitudes the human resource may look out for when employing.
Can do. You have to have a can-do attitude. You've got to be truthful. You've got to be resourceful. You know, you must have a character that says you can work with other people. There are attitudes. Employers hire for attitude. Your first degree, whether first class, second class, is just a basic entry. By the time we select those that we have, we're sure that on the balance, we've got the right people with the right attitude, that when you train them, they'll get to work.
Kwachi Godwin Daniel says, Mr. Andani, thanks very much for your words of motivation. I really need you one-on-one. Thomas Nee Hammond says, good evening, Mr. Andani. I like the point you made on the entrepreneurs creating the economy. What do you think are the necessary policies that the government can introduce to make our economy a strong one?
Well, I think Mr. Ken Oforiatta and Senior Minister should be. But look here, I mean, we all call it the enabling environment. There must be law and order. You can enforce contracts. Again, we talked about interest rates, which are, you know, the big conundrum. And Ghana government is still a very large part of the economy. You know, they still do big things like, you know, they control the ports, they control electricity, they control petroleum products. So if they can get all these services and products to people on time, you know, affordable, there's still a lot of government at the roads. So it's all these balancing that people have to do. Yeah, Ghana government still a significant part of the GDP, and they have to look at how they impact, you know, the private sector.
Ben Boat says, TV3, you are wonderful. Raymond Ando says, I'm Raymond. I'm starting a business organization called Enterprise Group Alliance, which aims at entrepreneurship, investment, business, training, employment. It's receiving much attention. Well, his message got truncated. Let me take this one from Akampapa Godwin. He says, I'm enjoying time with the captains with Ms. Andani. He's very learned. Thank you very much. Bright says, Ms. Andani, I have interest in agriculture and want to make it a main business plan as it stands now. I've got no land and I just started savings from my very little allowance. How far should I get to with my plan?
The first is land. Whichever agriculture you do, except fisheries, you need land, right? So, you know, Mr. Krampa, you know, needs to find some suitable land and, again, choose. There's a wide variety of things to do in agriculture, livestock, whether it's livestock, poultry, or ruminants, or crops. You know, there are several types of crops, agro-processing. Agriculture really should be the mainstay of this economy. It's a travesty, and I love agriculture. That's my first love. You know, that Ghana can be that poor with the kind of you know, vegetation and climate
as managing director of a commercial bank, are you willing to invest in agriculture?
Yes, well-packaged agricultural ventures. And only this morning, I was having a conversation with one of my colleagues how to, you know, reposition our cultural financing units, you know, to make sure. Because look here, I mean, if you look at the total GDP of Ghana, percentage of agriculture is probably getting close to, you know, 10%. That's about a $3.64 billion business. There are some success stories.
But a lot of the times the banks will refuse you financing. They say it's a highly risky area.
You see, we have to be clear what agriculture we're talking about. You know, we're not talking about, you know, and excuse me to say, I come from a rural area. I'm not talking about somebody with 5 acres, you know, who is taking a guess on the weather and stuff like that. I'm talking about commercial agriculture. And commercial agriculture, again, doesn't mean you alone going to do 500 acres of land. Commercial agriculture means it's about you with some 5-10 more people going to do 50 acres each, that is 500 acres. That's more manageable. But as a total unit, it's easier for you to attract financing. But this whole habit of Ghanaians wanting to fragment everything makes it very difficult for commercial financing. You want to do commercial financing, 500 birds or 1,000 birds in your backyard really is difficult, right? There may be some microfinance people who can help you, but come and tell me you're doing 100,000 birds. That 100,000 birds does not necessarily belong to you alone. Let's say 10 students from UPS decide they want to do poultry, and you have a plan that says want to be selling 10,000 birds a week. That's business. So it depends upon how you organize it. We can do it.
Thank you very much, Mr. Alassane Dani. This has been the very maiden edition of Time with the Captains. And guess what? Our guest has been Mr. Alassane Dani, the Managing Director, the Chief Executive Officer, and the Executive Director of Stanbic Bank Ghana Limited. He's been our guest on the program today, and we've had audiences from the University of Professional Studies. They've had a rare privilege and opportunity of interacting with our guest for the month of January. Same time next month, we have a surprise guest for you. So you've got to stay tuned in here at TV3 to know who that guest is going to be. If you want to be a part of the program, you can come to our front desk or call our front desk here at TV3 and just book a place. And who knows, you could be on your way to becoming that future entrepreneur that you wish to become. And Ms. Ndani is grateful to share with our audiences some souvenirs from Stanbic Bank Ghana Limited. That's his token, and to say thank you also for coming here tonight. Come on, let's show him some love.